Good morning in the early AM. This is crazy. It's just about 2:25 in the morning or so, 2:30. And woken up out of a absolutely crazy dream. And pretty much just 100% got me up and out. And just wanted to, because it was I don't want to sit here and describe my dream because I don't think there's anything more boring than that. But the gist of the whole thing was essentially that I was hanging out with one of my friends, and then he gets a phone call, and it's somebody who is deathly concerned about me going out to sea. And this is something that I've dealt with, I don't know, pretty much I don't wanna say my whole life, but my whole life of solo sailing for sure. And essentially, in this dream, I ripped because I can hear what this person is saying, and essentially it's like, that I'm rolling the dice and the odds are stacked against me. The more I do this thing, the more chance I have of having it turn out really badly. And essentially, being overtaken and then sunk and lost. But I eventually in this dream, I ripped the phone right out of the guy's hand, and I get him on the horn, and I start telling him why I think it's worth it to go out there, and all that sort of stuff, and what you knowing the risks, still sort of wanting to live my life in a certain way, in a certain direction, and not foregoing safety by any means, but taking a calculated risk at least. That's how I sort of well, anyway, so I'm basically, and I'm not being mean to the person, which was kind of nice actually, to tell you the truth. If subconsciously in your dreams you're even trying to be respectful to another entity who's trying to tell you what to do. I don't know. I think that says a lot about a person deep down inside, maybe. But so essentially, I'm talking about, um, life and how you want to live it, and the difference between just sort of mulling through and going through life and trying to be as safe as possible and live as long as possible and avoid death at all costs as possible. I think there's nothing wrong with that, and I think there is definitely a part of human nature that essentially says, "Hey, you probably wanna just protect yourself at all times and strive to survive," sorta instinct. I think they talk about that with the the whole lizard brain thing, but I think that's more about fight or flight, sorta stuff, but mm. Oh, that coffee's good. I'm gonna be regretting it. I was thinking about, get up, do do this, and then try and get back to bed. But I have a feeling that this one, hopefully, we can go on for a while because I've got a few points. And if I can do that, then it'll probably already be getting close to light time, and then maybe I can sort out a couple of things before we go into work. Excuse me. Oh, I was literally just asleep maybe 10 minutes ago, and, I don't know, it is what it is. Mm, but it was kinda fortuitous, and who knows, maybe this lunch I had with my new friend Jim the other day, and he and I spoke at length, or as long as you can in a 30-minute lunch break, but we spoke about how, you know, a lot of people do really, and it's sensible that we try to be in a safe and secure environment as much as possible. The vast majority of us do, but every once in a while there are sort of outliers to that, myself included, that get, for some reason, it in their head that they want to go out and they want to do certain things that are way out of the safety zone, just to go out and experience them and see what they're like. I mean, when I think about why I went and did my trip around the world, and even in the beginning pages, like the intro of my book, I talk about that I still have no idea why I went, and I don't think that's quite true anymore, and maybe it just comes down to old age or more time to ponder this subject, or being questioned about this subject by people. So there's a lot of thinking that goes back into it. It's not like you go and do something like that and then you never think about it again. And the fact that I'm still, I spend quite a lot of time alone. Your brain is twisting around and you start thinking about stuff. So I think one of the biggest draws for me initially was just the fact that I was being inspired and I was reading about these guys that went and did this thing and tried to get it going and make it all the way around the world solo and nonstop back in the 60s. And I'm reading these books and doing these yacht deliveries and I'm enjoying being out there. Um, and it just what I think the questions that kept popping up in my head is how does it feel after you've been alone at sea for a month? And then what does it feel like after 3 months and 6 months and even 9 months? And not only the alone part, but what does it feel like to be on the cusp of entering a place like the Southern Ocean down in the South Atlantic and know that you have to go underneath Africa before even getting into the Indian Ocean and trying to deal with all of the dangers and the risks that lie in that ocean alone. And then how do how do you feel about the fact that you still need to go underneath another continent and then the vast Pacific down to a place called Cape Horn that is basically the graveyard of the ocean? And those questions in my head mixed in with probably a healthy dose of respect and awe for the stories of these guys that could go down there and tried this. It just it was something that lit a fire inside of me and a passion for, I don't know, just trying to get out there and do it. That I was never even close to extinguishing without actually going out and going through that action and doing it. And I just, it was something where it was the focal point of how actually just to oh man, it was like the focal point of geez, I'm getting lost in the weeds on this one. uh it's it's a tough subject to all right, let me drop back a little bit. So you're sitting there and you're fully inspired, you're in awe, you're listening to these stories, and then you're also in a situation where you're slowly developing these tools about doing these activities. And even though I was on these boats and there were other people on them, when you're doing yacht deliveries, you're typically doing watches by yourself. So for hours, through the night or during the day, you're the only person up and awake. And so you do get this tiny, teeny little taste of what it feels like to be a solo sailor. And I can remember plenty of times being on watch and just being glad that no one else was around and I had the boat to myself and I was in charge of it. And there was really, I remember one instance on the first transatlantic that I ever did going across from, we went from Antigua over to Spain and the Spanish islands in the Mediterranean. And we had actually passed through Gibraltar and we were headed up towards these islands. We had a couple of days left and there was one like dog watch, basically I think it was the 3 to 6 a.m. watch, and I'm up there by myself, and we had been motoring for a while, and I had been on this trip already for almost 30 days, and I'm up there alone, and then the wind starts to come up, and I went and normally I would have gone down and sorta woke up somebody to come up and help and set all the sails and all that sort of stuff, but I mean, I had been on the boat for so long at this point that I could do it, and truth be told, it had power winches and things like that, so that was, a little bit of a benefit. But in any event, as this wind picks up and, the half light is sorta in the sky, there's not a lot of traffic around, and I ended up setting the full main, the staysail, and the full Genoa because it was only about a 5, 6 knot breeze, and it was just flat calm, and then suddenly shut that engine down, and now we're in the Mediterranean. I think I was probably, like, 23 years old. In the Med, we're sailing, we get just a little bit of heel on, there's silence, the boat is just absolutely loving it, and it was something that I had done sort of all by my onesie, as Jack Sparrow would say, and it felt absolutely amazing to sort of just manipulate this boat and this situation into this beautiful thing that I got to experience, and to do it sort of all alone. There was sort of that, hand on hip feeling of accomplishment of like, "Yes, look what I did. This is great. Ha ha." I'm capable of it. And I've felt that sort of thing in other aspects of sailing now that I do the vast majority of it by myself. Where, you go through some really rough, ugly, ugly weather, or you just go through some very uncomfortable weather as in like you're just beating into, choppy seas and you have to do it for day after day after day. And then you finally break free through that, or the wind shifts, and now you can crack off a little bit and reach away. And now things get comfortable. The boat's sailing fast and all that's going on. And when you make it through that ugly to get to that beauty, it really is, a spectacular feeling, and it one affects the other, I've always found, like, the uglier and crummier it is, if that's way up here, then even though it would only normally be, like, really cool to this level, now all of a sudden it's cool to, like, that level. Way, way more because you had to go through what you had to go through to get there, and to amplify that even further is when you do that sort of stuff on your own, at least in my experience, and so, I think once, to sort of get back to this idea of taking these risks and heading out to sea, and he's he I besides, like, this crazy dream that woke me up, and the funny part about this dream was the only thing I don't remember is how it sort of concluded. I sat there and I talked to this person, telling them sort of all these reasons why I do what I do, and it's essentially what I'm talking to you guys about now. But I don't remember how it went. I don't know if I was able to convince this person or not. Again, this is all going on inside of my head, but I don't know. I don't know. It was crazy, but uh, you know, when you do have these risks, that is also where you have the rewards. And for me, again, these rewards are these feelings of accomplishment and feelings of I don't know, proof of ability, I guess. Not to go proof of stake, proof of work, crypto terminology, but in essence, when you do go out and you cross an ocean, for instance, um, there's an amazing feeling that comes out of that, and there's a lot of risk that goes into that as well. I mean, if you cross the Atlantic Ocean, you're gonna deal with some probably pretty ugly weather. You have to duck and dodge through plenty of ships and all sorts of stuff like that, and yet it's an attainable thing. People do it every year, probably thousands of people do it. Maybe not thousands do it alone, but let's say 100 do it alone. maybe. I don't know what the numbers are. But those risks are sort of calculated, and you can hedge your bet, so to speak, against it. I don't know if that's the right term or not, but essentially things like life rafts and grab bags and ensuring that the boat is really well cared for and ready for sea and the sails are good and all the work that goes into it. I mean, that's a way of sort of I don't want to say it shrinks down the risk, because no matter how prepared a boat can be, it can never be more prepared than the ocean. When it comes to a battle, the ocean will always win no matter what size ship you have. I mean, take it from the Titanic. There's just no going back from that one. But it's one of those things where you can sort of mitigate a little bit of that risk and give yourself a better chance when everything is really prepared and the boat is ready to rock and roll and take a serious beating. But again, that risk still stands. But then you get into that reward side of things of I think the rewards are of doing these sailing trips absolutely begins right then and there, the moment you start to make your way off into the horizon and away from land, because instantly I get this feeling of adventure on the horizon. As corny as it might sound, it's sort of one of those things where this overwhelming feeling kinda comes up over you, and you're sorta like, oh, you're looking and the land is slowly disappearing, and eventually it's totally gone, and now you're completely out at sea, and you're just feeling 100% alive because you're in that moment. There's really nothing else that matters at that point except for you and your little vessel and whatever the wind and clouds and waves are doing, and it's really a way of for me, it shrinks down the whole scope of the world around me and all these problems that everybody hears about daily, because we're all so connected and there's so much news and everything going around on us. And you push away from that, or more appropriately, you sail away from that. And now you're in this world of just present. This is what's going on now. This is what I'm dealing with. And even though those thoughts of what's it going to be like tomorrow, or 100 miles, or out in the middle of the Atlantic, or over how am I going to pull into France or something like that, all these things can come up, but you sort of I've always been able to sorta let those, just like a feather floating down, just whee, let that just simmer, and then it disappears and you don't worry about it. But those that reward of being out there and being forced to deal with and focus on the present, I think is again, it's that scale right there of, like, it's risky to take off on a boat, and head out, because it hasn't, if you've been tied to a dock or on the hard for a long time, who knows if that boat's gonna sink, right? It happens all the time. But then you get out there and you start dealing with it, and then you get that reward of, "Hey, I'm out here and I'm in it, and it's forced upon me, and now I'm living in the present," which I think most people agree that's a better way. You could live your whole life thinking about your past, or live your whole life worrying about the future, or you could just join the present moment. And that's one of the things that I think these sort of taking on these risks is, at least in the adventure scope, is really, really good for. And then, um, as you get out there, you start to feel accomplishment when you make it days and weeks, and you're out there and you're sort of going through different issues. And one of the big ones, and it sounds almost counterintuitive, but when something breaks and something goes wrong on the boat, uh, even though it's not a good situation by any means, and I usually feel actually pretty bad when this does happen, because I feel like I've let the boat down in a way. But when this happens, then all of a sudden you have to get not only proactive, but very creative sometimes, because you obviously have a very limited supply of things to be able to fix with or replace parts. And So suddenly you're sort of thrown in this situation, and again, I mean, it can be a bit of it's always a risk that you're going to break something, but it's almost always a fact too. It's going to happen on a sailboat. There's too many moving parts, and there's too much force and too much this, that, and the other thing. Something's always going to break. So it is a bit of a risk as you sort of plan these voyages. But again, the reward is now all of a sudden you're forced into a situation where you have to get going. You have to do a whole bunch of stuff. You have to get creative. You have to work hard, and you absolutely have to fix whatever the heck broke so that you can continue on and keep going in your sort of your destination. Sort of, you just have to keep going. Yeah. I don't know why I'm trying to like pontificate that out. It's crazy. Um, and then obviously the biggest one is when you pull in, but this one, the end of any voyage is always a bittersweet thing that I've found, because as I'm pulling in and all the things that are on my mind at that point, and again, this is like the exact opposite of when you set out and now you're fully in the present. As you pull in, it's the only time I've ever been on a voyage where I start considering everything else that's gonna happen in the future, what it's gonna be like to eat that hamburger, what it's gonna be what the beer is gonna be, um, how I'm gonna pull into the harbor. I start to get these worries of like, "Oh, geez, what if the weather turns and what if the engine doesn't work?" and all this sort of stuff, and for me, it's a great reminder of how nice it is out there as opposed to, having to sort of deal with the real world, or the world of I shouldn't say the real world because obviously they're both very real, but it's I for me, having spent so much time out there, obviously there's a preference for the, former and not the latter being when you're out at sea, it's a simple and, a very beautiful existence, and I think it can be on land as well. I'm not trying to get crazy like that, but it's just different. There's a whole lot of input coming in, when I'm on land, and sometimes it's a bit overwhelming. But so it's a little bittersweet for me, but you have this beautiful thing where you've accomplished your goal and you're pulling into the next port and you've made it. You've been out for a month or something like that. And so that definitely feels good. And all these things sort of accumulate into the pile of excuses or rationalizations of why I take the risk to then go out and put myself in this situation that I have to get myself out of. And maybe that is a big part of it as well, is that self challenge of, right now, in a lot of ways, the world, I think, gives people the opportunity to not give up by any means. I don't want to sound like that, but the world gives everybody the opportunity to be very secure and safe and live a very normal, structured life that doesn't involve a huge amount of risk and also probably doesn't have a huge amount of reward. Case in point, you can get a very, very low stress type of job that just pays you enough. You can get a small apartment and you can probably take the bus and you can just do that and you can work for somebody else and you can go and continue your life all the way until you're old, 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 and then they'll even cut you a little bit of a check to be able to just keep keep going until you finally kick the bucket. And I don't know. I mean, for some people, that might be absolutely the best, just having that security. I mean, I think if I was a really anxious person and I couldn't let the worries of the world go and all that, and I know people like that, and uh, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. It's just the opposite side of that would be, I think that you get this bug where the idea of going out and taking on the biggest challenges that you can and really adding such a element of risk and reward into your life suddenly you're going to have these ups and downs, but that is going to be an adventure in and of itself. And it just, I don't know, I've found personally in my life that it has yielded just an immense amount of things to think about, things to share with people. That's probably one of the most surprising parts about coming back from even just the Appalachian Trail or the big trips around the world and all that, is that people like to hear about it. And I know that it definitely, there, I'll be honest, and there is part of me that enjoys sort of that bit of attention, even though I typically will always get a little overwhelmed. If I'm in a big room and there's a lot of people asking me, firing away questions, there's a limit to how much of that I can take before I need to like recoil back into a corner and sort of escape. But it is also, there is an ego thing there where it's kind of nice to have people in awe, or tell me that they would never ever do anything like that, and all that sort of stuff. But in the essence, I think what I really enjoy about it is just bringing an experience back to people, to everybody, anybody that wants to hear about it, and maybe just that small glimmer of hope that it might just inspire somebody else to get off the couch and go for it, and take on some sort of little semblance of a challenge. And I've always told people that it never has to be the ultimate thing. Even in my life, the first little adventures that I ever went on were little 15 and 20-mile biking trips just around Petoskey, nothing big. But then we ventured off in our teenage years up to these camping trips up in the UP and up in Minnesota, and then those would be like 10 days, and you're out in the woods, and you actually have to be sort of self-sufficient, and, if you don't bring something, then you don't have it because 'cause you're in the woods now, and those sort of, I think, were the initial spark of trying to, I don't know, challenge myself for these rewards, because you'd be out there and you'd be in the most beautiful setting. You can't hear a car, there's no planes, there's nothing, you're just in these absolutely amazing woods, and that's the reward. And there's nothing else, there's nothing injecting itself into you, nothing like, there's no ads, there's no none of it, and it's just this peaceful, in the moment existence. But it's a risk, you gotta have your little first aid kit. You can fall, you can break your leg, you can get giardia, you can bit by a tick with Lyme disease, who knows, mauled by a bear. There's plenty of risks out there. But again, if you want those rewards, because you can read a book or you can watch a movie about being in the woods, but it's never gonna be the same. You'll never feel really how wonderful and how scary and anxious and crazy, but beautiful and amazing it can be when you get in those situations. And I don't know, I think a lot of that was what Jim and I were talking about the other day at our lunch, and how sharing that sort of stuff is a very important part of when you go out and you do trips like this. And so I think with like the podcast and with the live streams and the videos and all the stuff that I'm just trying to put out there, I'm hoping that this isn't some sort of like purge before I set off to sea on the next time, knowing sort of you ever get that feeling inherently inside of you that you're sort of like, boy, don't know if I'm gonna make it back off the next one. And I'm not trying to freak anybody out, because I definitely would not head out to sea if I had a really bad feeling. I think I'm one of those people, if I really thought that there was a chance the plane was gonna go down, like, if I had that just crazy eerie feeling, oh, I'd turn around. I wouldn't get on that plane. Now if I'm already on the plane and then I get a feeling like that, I'm not also gonna be the freak mo who's like, "I gotta get off the plane, open the door." Like, that's not happening. I kinda understand that that's probably more anxiety. But, the night before, You have a crazy, vivid, insane dream. And I think that's kind of the nice part is that at least I think I would have remembered it if in this dream I would have, you know, flash forward to I'm out at sea and then the boat goes down or something like that. And thankfully, I've never really had that. I've had dreams where the boat's sinking, but usually doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I don't know. That's pretty crazy. But and I kind of think that possibly, very much possibly, inspiration maybe what has brought about some of these thoughts and these feelings lately because the Golden Globe race took off the other day. And so these guys and gals are beating their way out in old timey boats, just like mine, without much technology, just like me. And with the goal in mind to sail all the way around the world without stopping and see if they can do it. And there is even a semblance of a race involved to see who can actually do it fastest. I don't It's the one race on this planet though that I kind of have the feeling most of the competitors, at least the first time competitors, are just looking at it as the adventure. I can't believe in my head that the average among them is just like, "I am gonna win this thing. The trophy is mine." I don't think it's that type of a race, and then, it's gonna be going on for the next, like, 7 months or so because these boats are a little bit faster than Old Sparrow. Typically, they're about 4 feet bigger and a little bit newer. Sparrow's a 74, I think, and, most of these boats are a little newer than that, but I don't know. It's gonna be very interesting to watch, but I think it's already giving me a little itch where I was like, "Oh, those guys all took off? Oh," and I'm starting to check the weather a lot more, and I'm seeing the weather patterns, and whenever I look at these weather patterns, I'm always like right now, even in the Atlantic with the hurricanes out there, I'm sort of like, "Ooh, oh, if I was out there, if I was on that lower edge, whew, I could scream out to the east and get to the doldrums." And I don't know, but the same time, then I look around this boat and I'm like, "Oh, geez, project, 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 project," and, I don't know, it's there's a lot. There's just a lot of irons in the fire right now, and I'm hoping to be able to, put them all together over the next month and a half, 2 months, so that it will be once again my turn to, head out to sea, not for some grand, crazy, epic round the world voyage, but that may be again in the future. Just not yet. I've learned my lesson. If anything, I like to take notes from my I don't want to say mistakes, but experiences. And that being said, in that frame of mind, the last two trips that I've tried to go on, I was trying to essentially put things together too quickly on too small of a budget, and without without having thoroughly gone through this boat the way that it really should have been done. There can be, I think, a little bit of an overconfidence when you have a boat like Sparrow. These West sails are just built so strong that you sort of just believe in them, and sometimes that can get you into trouble because it's really, I don't know, it really is one of those situations where you're like, "Oh shit, yeah, it'll be fine. It'll be totally fine. You'll be all good." Oh man. But, all right. Holy cow. This is, wow, we've been on here for over 30 minutes. That's pretty crazy. Holy smokes. Wow. And there's people watching. I was recording on another screen, so I wasn't seeing that. Oh, I just saw a notification. West Coast. Love the podcast. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it. Oh, Pierre Overboard. Did you ever read The Great Adventure in Depth by Commander Bill King? No, I've never read the Bill King's account. I've definitely read quite a bit about Bill King's adventure, dude. When I hear that story about oh man, when I sorry, let me just click that. When I hear about and read about Bill King and his sort of adventures, and well, not I don't want to. His adventures are crazy. He was a submarine guy. I mean, it was unbelievable, but him going through that storm in the South Atlantic that took out his masts, that has always made it so that I fear the South Atlantic like crazy, because I don't know if it's the weather patterns that are down there coming off the Andes Mountains, but I mean, he was in basically a fully blown hurricane. And there was the other competitor in that race who was in there as well, Motissier's friend, who ended up dropping out after that, and he wasn't even near where he was hundreds of miles away from Bill King. But I mean, it was also one of those lessons when Bill essentially, as he told it, I guess, he ended up finally getting into a point. I think he was lying a halt and he needed to get some sleep. He had been up for quite a long time. The seas were absolutely massive. At one point, he describes basically getting picked up by this wave and then seeing a seabird fly, in the trough of the wave in front of him. And it's like 30 or 40 feet below. I mean, if that's not an epic scene, because the whole thing took place under the full moon, which is absolutely amazing. Talk about risk and reward there. I mean, and actually that brings me to a good point. Well, with Bill King though, and then he goes down below and he's lying a haul. So far it's been so good. I can imagine it was probably really scary because you're getting just absolutely walloped every once in a while by a breaker. Because even if it's like a 10-foot breaking wave, that impacting the side of the hull is insanely loud. It's crazy violent. It's really just a scary situation. Now multiply that by like say three, so you've got 30-foot breaking waves. Now you're in a position where you catch the wrong wave and boom, it's going to flip you over. Um, and yeah, he ends up going down below, gets in his bunk. I don't think he's even down there. Or no, maybe he was just going to get a sail bag or a sail tie. In any event, he went down below just for a couple of minutes, and lo and behold, bang, the wave comes, flips him over, snaps his rigs off, and then he's out of the race and he has to limp all the way back. And I think that in one of his memoirs or something, I think that he talks about that being the most miserable position, like mentally, of just trying to get back to land after knowing that your hopes and your dreams are dashed because he had the boat built, all that stuff. The amount of work that goes into some of these guys building their own boats and then setting off on these trips, I hats off to them. I mean, I just essentially went down to the corner store and bought one. I did have to put quite a bit of work into it, but nothing like building it from the keel up. Absolutely amazing. But I think I'll probably end up trying to do one of those sailing stories about Bill King's night in the South Atlantic, and then maybe I don't know. I guess there was a story when he was trying to do it the second time because he really just wanted to accomplish the feat. I have a feeling he was one of those guys that really wanted to, I don't know, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but put another notch on his belt as far as adventures in life that are accomplished. But in any event, I think he was south of Australia and a great white started chewing on his rudder or something like that. And then he ended up having to retire from the second time he did it. So I don't even know if he was ever able to make it around the world solo nonstop or not. I'll have to search into that. Oh man, what do you use for weather forecasts? Weather forecasts are a little typically I'm using grid files, and essentially all that is very small data so that you can download it through a sat phone or on Iridium Go, but it just gets blown out on something called zgrib, and that gives you your interactive, so to speak, weather chart. I am going to be looking into Iridium Go and getting predict wind so that when I go out to sea, not only I can see it, but people can see what my track is for easier sort of tracking and stuff. And again, that's sort of in the same subject of trying to be able to share these adventures to hopefully inspire people to get up and get out and take a little risk and try and get some of that reward. I've never yeah, I guess way back in the early days, I did, we used to have an SSB, or an HF radio, and we used that for picking up weather forecasts sailing off the coast of Australia. But that got phased out pretty quickly when the sat phones became very, very reliable. And the amount of electricity and power that you needed for an HF radio and the know-how as well, which I've always thought that if something is really technical and difficult and you master it, there's something kind of cool about that. Um, but to install an HF radio on Sparrow today would just be a nightmare. And if I can just pick up a sat phone. Although I've had a sat phone go pretty much dead on me, and then I think one of the troubles with that sort of equipment is that when those things die, very much like an iPhone, there's no bringing that. There's no resuscitating that back to life. That's definitely a risk for sure. Is that you're going to have electronic failure. Uh, just finished the audiobook. Thank you, Howard. I appreciate it. Hopefully you liked it. That was probably one of the most difficult endurance feats of trying to share this story with people, because I know a lot of people, instead of it's hard to find the time to sit down and open up the book and read it and everything. But to be able to listen to it in the background while you're doing whatever else you have to do is quite nice, and I like it. I know my brother Sven absolutely loves audiobooks. His library on Audible has to be like 400 or something. But his books kind of I label them as scary books, and they're all about real life situations. Like, he had one book called Rabies, and it's basically the history and the possible future of rabies, and the gift of fear, all about just all these things, and then very, very concise political and geopolitical books about all this sort of stuff that when you're out at sea and you're alone, they're not the things that you want to be pondering and thinking of unless you're absolutely in the mood to do that. But I've turned on some of his audiobooks that he's given me. 5 minutes in, I'm like, nope, I'm not going down that rabbit hole today. Chris Hedges, I don't need to listen to this. I appreciate your efforts, but I don't need to hear it right now while I'm in the Atlantic Ocean. Oh man, too funny, too funny. Well, I think I am going to try and get a little sleep. Maybe I'm doubting that's going to happen because I still have a full coffee. Mm. Oh, there was one question that I got on one of the last videos. So I put together this clip of going through sort of the whole thing of going through this pretty ugly little line squall that ended up being multiple lines of squall in the doldrums last year. And it's about like a 7-minute video or something like that. And in the beginning, you can see that I have full main, full staysail, and full, well, not full jib, but like a working jib. So I've got all as much canvas flying as possible in the background. And then I turn the camera, and you can see pretty ugly cloud situation going on behind me, and or just upwind of me. And I had already been out at sea for like 40 something days at this point. So I'm very in tune with what's going on and everything. And I'm very, very quick with being able to drop sails. And the question essentially was, in your video, I got to ask, what the heck? Why did you have like full mainsail and all those sails up and da 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 da? And it was a really good question because it does look a little like, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Big squall coming in, you'd think you want to prepare early and all that. The only problem is, essentially, I was trying to, in that trip, get down to Cape Horn and trying to do it in a timely fashion. So one of the things you have to do is basically sail your way right up to the edge as close as you can until the winds come in from the squall, and then you start dousing. Sort of, you try and douse it, and then 10 seconds later, the wind hits. Sometimes you get lucky with that, and sometimes you don't. It's again with tonight's topic. It's a risk that you have to take. But uh, I've always found with these squalls, typically, and that one in particular, was that if I take too much sail down too quickly, then the boat loses all momentum and all speed. You can see in the beginning that we're really not moving fast. We're just essentially I'm trying to keep the boat heeled over so it doesn't start rolling to windward and doing that and then just slogging out with the sails and all that sort of stuff. So I'm keeping that up just to keep a little power on. But when I deal with the squall coming in, essentially, I am under the agreement with Mother Nature that, and I've only learned this through experience with my boat, so it's different with everybody's. But essentially, if the wind comes on and it comes on real strong, it takes only a few seconds for me to send Sparrow sailing directly downwind, ease that main way out, and then drop whatever head sails that I have, and I'm pretty good up even with the full main, I'm pretty good up to like 30, probably 35 knots, of wind because I'm gonna start going really fast as well, which cuts the wind, and with just that mainsail, it's not too bad. And typically, if it was blowing that hard, as soon as the other sails were all down, and those can be literally just doused. Like I will just whoop, undo it, let it fall. It can drag in the sea for a few minutes. It does not matter to me. And so that just depowers that. And then I can go straight to the mainsail and put a reef in, even going downwind. It's not great as far as the chafe on the sails, but it does work. You don't have to be pointed into the wind for a little reefing session on the main. But that was why I had so much sail up. Essentially, it was to really use and abuse every bit of wind, and also just sort of being one with the boat at that point, and really knowing what I was capable of handling. But it is again, it's a risk because you're looking at this cloud and you're looking at basically this wall of water and wind that's coming at you, and you're sort of like, boy, how bad's this one going to get? Because I have had instances where the wind literally I saw, you could see the effect the wind was having as it was cascading straight down from the sky, hitting the ocean, spreading out. And when that hit me, that was the only time I've ever like really straight up had to just go bare poles as quickly as possible. It was like a micro burst, but I think the winds probably hit 70 knots. They went from probably blowing like 30 to 70, and luckily it did not last more than like 10, 15 minutes, but that was wild. Oh man. Does your chart plotter GPS work open ocean or only able to get a fix? Say a Garmin InReach device. No, all that stuff, that's the beauty of the old GPS. It works all the way around the entire planet, which mitigates the risk to stay on point. All those GPS things, they basically they're built and made so that they can pinpoint you wherever you want. And I don't really use a chart plotter when I'm out at sea. I like to sort of just go the traditional route, which is got my chart out there, and I get either I do my position with a sextant using the sun, or I'll just get it off the AIS, get my little lat and long, and then I'll throw it down. Because when you're out there ocean sailing, the keeping track of where you are sort of thing, I typically am only doing that 4 times a day. So in my logbook every 6 hours, I'll log what the heck's going on, and then once a day, I'll actually plot my position on the chart because you gotta remember the chart's this big, and it's of the entire Atlantic Ocean, let's say. I do it in pretty much those sections, and if I sat there and tried to chart it every 3 hours, you'd just see a continuous line going, and pretty much I'm sure I'd rip the paper right out, so, I don't know. Pretty crazy stuff. Well, I'm gonna call it right there and, be out of here, and I don't know, I may try and do a little project or something, or, maybe get to editing or something like that. But everybody that was watching, thank you. I appreciate it. And obviously, Obviously, big thanks to everybody who listens and comments and all that sort of stuff. So I really, really appreciate it, and I'm hoping to be able to do this more. I had them reset the router, so hopefully there weren't too many interruptions. And everybody have a good night. And that's about it from Old Mighty Sparrow. Thanks for joining me tonight. Appreciate it. Du- 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 du.